Live. And we are live, or at least we should be live. Hello, everyone. I am Zimzol99, and today with me is my guest, Mr. Donny Winter. Say hello, my good man.
Hello, my friends. How are you today? And thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Of course, thank you very much for being on and accepting it. And of course, I think I saw it was a either on Facebook or another site. You said that you just made it to 3,000, like 300 subscribers.
I'm also
Reached
at
a subscriber goal.
I'm almost at 3,000 subscribers. I have like maybe 50 to go. Like I'm hoping by the end of the year I'll get to that threshold.
Do you check Social Blade at all? Like, see how they like calculate your milestones at all, or like you someone's like, oh, if it happens, it happens, kind
Yeah,
of thing.
according to Social Blade, I'm supposed to have like 20,000 subscribers in like the next 5 years, and I'm just like, I don't think no, that's not gonna happen.
Yeah, I think like how their algorithm works is that they do it based entirely on how quickly you've been gaining subscribers already, and then they'll just do that flat across the board for like years.
Oh yeah, it continually updates too. Like if you slow down at a certain point, then they'll
Yeah.
decrease it, so on and so forth. So
But before we got in, we were talking about like college stuff, but I know I advertised it all as a Mothra stream, and I would say out of anybody I can think of off the top of my head, Mr. Winters here would be the resident Mothra. Would you say Stan? Mothra fan?
Mothra fan gay for sure.
There you go.
If I could flip my hair, I would totally do that.
Well, you can kind of do it from the side, like,
Which
there you go. So with the like, I would say Mothra, like the original Mothra story was based on like it was like a short story that they converted into a film. Have you ever seen or read the original story, like a translation of it, or even seen like images of like the story itself at all?
I have not. Well, I've seen images of it. They were very low quality images, but if memory serves me correctly, it is called The Luminous Fairies in Mothra, and I could be wrong. It's been a while since I've done research on it, but I think it was more so like a type of graphic, type of like I don't want to say graphic novel because it was like a weird hybrid text, I think.
Yeah.
But that is what the original movie was based on. Yeah.
And then, of course, after Mothra's solo film, she shifted away into the Godzilla series, and then she appeared in a lot of Showa Godzilla movies, and then transferred over into the Heisei films. And we'll get into the Heisei films because I think that would be an interesting discussion with you to have, specifically because of your feelings about Godzilla versus Mothra from that series.
Well, let me establish, and I know I've mentioned this to many people, I could probably do 30 live streams about Mothra and talk enough about it to fill up all of those 30 streams, obviously.
And make them like 15 hours too.
Yes.
Like a scene by scene, like letter by letter analysis.
I'm literally one of those people I'll knock on a door and be like, hey, let me tell you about this analytical aspect of Mothra. And then that's
Exactly
followed
why
by
I wanted
eye
you
rolls.
on for this stream. It's perfect. And then obviously after the Heisei Godzilla series, Mothra went off and did her own thing. She got her own series again. She is the only character, with technically the exception of King Ghidorah, to shift out of Godzilla into a separate series. And then, of course, as soon as they got out, they dragged her back into the Millennium series. And then, of course, now with the Reiwa era and the anime films, and then Godzilla King of the Monsters. And I know there have been streams where you've talked about it, but for the sake of posterity, explain how your feelings about Mothra in King of the Monsters real quickly before we get into that film as a whole.
So, all right. For King of the Monsters, I really enjoyed the film. And of course, I was immediately drawn to it because, I mean, this is the first Americanized rendition of Mothra that we've ever seen. And hopefully we'll see more in the future of her in like American Godzilla films. But I was very wowed by her appearance. Like at first, I was a little bit confused because she looks kind of predatory in the sense that she has like mantis-like forelegs and a stinger, so on and so forth. But I mean, after reading some explanations given by the director of like, well, she is an alpha creature living in a world where she has to defend herself against other alpha beasts. Like she needs to have formidable physical abilities, right? So that's how I got used to her new appearance that way. I think the wing design is beautiful. I think that every moment that she is brought into different scenes, like her entrances are, I cried like 3 times,
Mhm.
actually several times.
Like, definitely King of the Monsters does a good job of introducing and really paying good service to its monster icons, and I
Oh yeah,
know
like every monster had like an iconic entrance. Like it was really epic. And I think that's what really was powering that film specifically is the spectacle, you know.
Mhm. And would you say out of, like, all your Mothras, out of all the designs, and I would say even concept art, if you could think of concept art off the top of your head, where would this Mothra place for you?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say probably third or fourth. My favorite design is the Rainbow Mothra design from the third Mothra film, out of the Mothra trilogy.
Mhm.
My second is Armor Mothra's design from the third film as well. Totally, totally awesome.
Yeah, that's definitely you're not gonna expect from Mothra, old
It,
armored bug.
oh yeah, it was glorious. My third, was that second? Yeah, that was second. Third is probably the design from Tokyo SOS to Godzilla Final Wars, like that original, like it takes like the original design and like modifies it a little bit, but it also retains its majesticness.
Yeah, because she's got like the fluff from like a classic Mothra, but then she's kind of got the GMK legs. Because usually Mothra's legs are very stumpy. I would say more the Heisei films legs, and even the
Oh
Showa
yeah,
one's legs too. But like she definitely has long legs, and maybe that might be to her detriment because she does lose one against Godzilla in Tokyo SOS.
right. Well, like I like honestly, the deciding factor for MonsterVerse Mothra being number 4 is I think the size really bothers me. Because in most iterations of Mothra, aside from maybe the Mothra trilogy variations, Mothra has always had like a very gigantic wingspan. She's always like in many ways she has dwarfed the other monsters that she's been in the vicinity of, like Godzilla,
Mhm.
for example. And I really felt like she was super small in the MonsterVerse film, but, you know, like, I understand why they probably did it because they wanted to provide contrast.
Mhm.
But still, I was just like, I feel like she could be a little bit more the same size as Rodan. Like, why
Yeah,
not?
because it does seem in a way that Mothra had gotten smaller as the series went on, and then she only got bigger when Godzilla got bigger because originally the original Mothra larva is a lot bigger than Godzilla was, being the same height but just far longer, and then the original Mothra being far bigger than like even bigger than King Ghidorah if like the stats are right in my head. But
Hmm.
yeah, and then she got back to her original size by the Heisei era, and then she got smaller again until we got to
Yeah.
the Monsterverse. Because that Monsterverse is probably, I think, the smallest version of Mothra ever, but I'm not sure.
Wingspan wise, no, but body
Yeah,
wise, like
yeah, she's
lengthwise
got
and height.
very big wings. I guess that's just because of like small body creature, big need to get off the ground. Science,
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah,
We're English
I
folk, but
guess
not.
it does make a lot of sense. Like if you look at it, like I mean, scientifically, she's an insect, and it wouldn't really make much logical sense to have a body that's gigantic like she has in most
Yeah,
of her different
and
generations.
that'd be perfect, like, to segue into a B movie reference, but this isn't the stream to make that reference, so we'll leave that as is. Despite one of her concept colors actually having yellow jacket like inspiration, because there is one where she's mostly yellow and black.
Mhm.
And before we continue on, I also want to say hello to Brandon Davis. Greetings to Machine Dragon Lair. And hello, Chris Silla 2014. Hello to you all.
Welcome, my friends. It's good to see you.
It's good to see everyone who's here. However, going back to the original Mothra, um, where would that sit for you? This would be technically the genesis of Mothra on film. like, is it your favorite out of the Mothra films, or would you say that, like, you felt Mothra was done better in other series, like even her own trilogy?
hmm Well, I will be honest. I love most of Mothra's different iterations. My personal favorite film is actually the first Mothra film out of the Mothra trilogy.
So,
Um,
the Mothra one for anyone wondering.
mhm. Yeah, and the reason why that is because I feel like they expand on Mothra's backstory a little bit more elaborately. It's kind of similar to the Heisei Mothra's backstory, but a little bit more, I don't know, like you get to know more of the history, like she fought like such and such monster, this happened, so on and so forth. And I thought that they really did an effective job giving the monsters personality in those films, especially that first one, because sorry if I'm spoiling this for anybody who's not watched the Mothra trilogy. P.S. You should. But like in the first film, like the the mother Mothra ends up dying by like drowning to death. And
Mhm.
it's like a really, really heart-wrenching scene. Like I am literally a 31-year-old man and I literally cry still to this day when I watch that scene, because like the way like the sound is made, the way like that she is interacting with her child, like you can almost infer emotion out of it. And I thought that was really well done. Like it really made me look at Mothra in a different way. I loved Mothra before, but I really feel like that film cemented it for me. Because prior to seeing that, like I appreciated Mothra, but she wasn't my super duper favorite until
Oh,
then.
really?
Yeah.
So, like, how long ago had it been, like, in your journey into kaiju that you had seen the Rebirth of Mothra films?
Oh, this is going to date me. I was first introduced to the Rebirth of Mothra films in like 2001 or 2002, I think. And it's because they were on Sci-Fi way back when.
Yeah, I remember that because even post the early 2000s into the later 2000s, they would still have the Rebirth of Mothra films on from time to time. That's where I even first saw the Rebirth of Mothra films.
Oh yeah, and for the longest time I thought there were only two films because they would only air the first two back to back. But then they started airing the third one and I like literally was flailing as a preteen. um but that's when I was introduced to that. If you're curious, prior to Mothra, my favorite kaiju was Gorosaurus. I don't know why, but
Oh,
for
really?
for like a decade, Gorosaurus was my favorite.
Why, like, I think anyone knows you as the Mothra Man. Why Gorosaurus? I know I love Gorosaurus, but now I want to know why.
um, well, I always found Gorosaurus to be kind of more mysterious than the others because he appears less frequently in films. And this had been before I even saw King Kong Escapes, mind you. So
Hmm.
my only exposure to him was Destroy All Monsters and the stock footage in Godzilla's Revenge. So I was just like, who is this really cool dinosaur that is not Godzilla but can jump on things?
Yeah, just as big as Godzilla and technically saves the day as he's the one who really beats Ghidorah up more than anyone else.
And he was pretty ruthless too. Like Gorosaurus does not take shit. Like
Well,
I
yeah, I mean,
apologize for being profane, but
oh no, don't worry about it. Thankfully, well, not it's not my girlfriend's dream, so you are allowed to be a little bit more vulgar in
my
this
bad, because
sense.
I'm fairly sure I've been profane on Alyssa's streams too.
Well, don't worry, we've definitely we've made sure you've been very good,
Oh, thank you,
or I would
thank
have done
you.
something about it. I swear, and I know Lagiacris has to say Godzilla '98 for the lulz because everyone knows my stance about that film.
What
And
is your stance? I actually don't know what your stance is, so enlighten me.
is not a good Godzilla movie. Is not a good design. Is not a good movie. And April's a terrible person. Like There's so many, like, I know there was another the Monsters vs. Men podcast brought it up. I don't think anyone else has ever brought it up, but April's a really terrible person when you actually look at it.
She basically is a representation of every troubling female white woman like stereotype of the late 90s. I actually wrote a paper about this subject at one point when I was in my undergrad because I liked tearing apart characters, and that was one that I really focused on.
Oh, there you go.
And unfortunately, like as far as I'm aware, that actress hasn't. I think she retired from acting not
After
long.
98?
Yeah, not long. I think she was in like some smaller roles, but they didn't get much exposure. So, I mean, one could make the theory that could Godzilla 98 be responsible for complicating her career?
I
You never
mean,
know.
how many I think did Mather Broderick end up in post 98?
True. This is true.
Because,
I can't think of any.
and same thing with Jean Reno. Although a lot of I never knew this, it was from a different review, but a lot of people who did that film were also in The Simpsons. Like they were
Mhm.
voice actors for The Simpsons. Like Hank Azaria. I forget who
Mhm.
he voices, but he did a lot of voices in The Simpsons. So it that always reminds me now, it's the cast of The Simpsons in Godzilla.
Well, what's really unfortunate is that film actually at that time was extremely successful. And if you
Yeah.
compare it to the performance of Godzilla 2014 and King of the Monsters and like weigh in inflation over
Mm.
time, that film is actually the strongest performing American Godzilla film.
I
So
think
it,
that's
it
also,
begs, it makes
yeah.
you wonder, like, since the film was so successful, why did it go on and complicate potentially the careers of these actors and actresses,
I'd
right?
say definitely like complicated their careers of these actors. It definitely complicated a lot of people's reservations about another Godzilla movie post 98. Um, I would say like even for its time, I think it only made seventh out of like the highest grossing movies of that time.
Mhm.
Again, I could go into 98, but this isn't a 98 stream. We're gonna have to get like dedicated 98 fans in to defend the film because I can't bash the film every single time, although everyone wants me to.
Like, I'm not a huge fan of it. Like, and it's the furthest probably from my top favorites. But if I'm bored and it's on TV, I might turn it on because there are elements that I find entertaining,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah, it's late 90s schlock in my opinion. I
Basically.
like even out of like disparaged like entries in a film series, I would probably watch 98 more than any of them. So like this is like a like if you sat me down with Dragon Ball Evolution and Godzilla 98, I'd rather watch Godzilla 98 than Dragon Ball Evolution.
I
Maybe
think I would
because I'm a
rather
Godzilla
watch
fan.
I would rather watch grass grow than Dragon Ball Evolution. Like that movie, like I know this is not Dragon Ball subject of the stream, but just to digress, I am a huge fan of Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, and I found that movie to be very an insult, let's just say, in every way to everything about that universe.
Again, it's the 98 of Dragon Ball stuff, in my opinion. Aside from maybe like Bio Broly, but again, we're not doing a Dragon Ball stream. This is a Mothra stream. So getting into I wanted to talk and sort of blend these two questions because I wanted us to talk about both the first 64 film
Mhm.
and then the 92 Mothra versus Godzilla. A lot of people compared the two, and Heisei one gets a lot more disparagement than like, but the Heisei films in general these days get a lot of disparagement. I know a lot of arguments I've heard is like weak cast, weak effects, beam spamming, if that's actually an argument. What is your opinion if you've like listened to any kind of criticisms of Mothra versus Godzilla, and what's your defense for them?
Honestly, like I do think that that movie does get a lot of misplaced criticism. Because if you look at that film's success, that is actually the most successful film in the Heisei era.
Mm.
And I think, if memory serves me correctly, one of the most successful Godzilla films in the entire franchise.
Yeah, no, it definitely was. Do you have a general idea how much better it performed than any of the other Heisei films at the
Um,
time?
if keep in mind, like, I'm just vaguely remembering some statistics, but I think it received more awards, like film awards. I think did it receive a music award, like, for composition? Because, I mean, Akira Ifukube's score of that film is
Yeah.
phenomenal. But I think that it outperformed the other films by at least a good, I mean, looking at it in American terms, like $5 to $10 million.
Hmm.
I'm trying to remember the statistics from Toho Kingdom, and I can't remember them off the top of my head. But I could be wrong,
Hmm.
but I used to be obsessive about those things.
Yeah,
Um,
all of us in our younger years. I mean, even I am coming out of that stage of my life where there's some things I obsessed about that I don't obsess about as much now.
mhm.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
like,
no,
same here.
generally, it's always been known that Mothra versus Godzilla or Godzilla versus Mothra did very well in comparison to the other films. And even towards Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla 2, Space Godzilla and Destroya, how do you feel the film stands against those films? Because I know like a lot of people say, oh, early Heisei is good to okay. It's just the versus films that are like the really bad ones. So what's your opinion regarding
So,
that?
if I were to rank them from, in my opinion, best to weakest, I would say Godzilla vs. Biollante comes first. That
Mhm.
is actually my favorite Godzilla film.
Hmm.
I know, surprising. It's
Yeah,
not a
no,
Mothra
that's
film.
I'm very surprised.
Um, and we can go into talking about that in a little bit, but I do love Godzilla vs. Biollante. I feel like it's a very solid film, very much incorporates like thriller and kind of horror aspects that echo back to the original Godzilla film, in my opinion. The second strongest, I would argue, is probably, I would say, a tie between Godzilla vs. Destroya and Mothra. Godzilla vs. Destroya and Mothra. Um, and third, or we'll say the third, because the prior one's tied. The third, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2. I think Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah comes next, and then Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla last. Although it's kind of interchangeable. I mean, if we want to include the Return of Godzilla in that as well, because I literally have people sometimes say, "Don't include the Return of Godzilla."
It's a really weird thing
Like,
for. They'll be like, "Ah, well,
it's like,
It's Showa, guys, don't
yeah.
include it." And then like you'll say, "Well, I'm talking about the continuity." And they'll be like, "Oh, it's a whole
Here,
can of weird."
here is why I think Godzilla vs. Mothra deserves a little bit more attention and credit. Number one, it sets up more so like the story continuity in the Heisei era, because if we watch Godzilla versus Space Godzilla, um, that film, like, I mean, Space Godzilla's existence is like theorized to either be Mothra's fault for carrying Godzilla's cells into outer space, or Biolante's fault,
Mm.
right? Although there is the argument, like, since time was rewritten in Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, does Biolante really exist?
Oh
You
no,
know,
Biollante still definitely exists. Are you
I
on the upkeep
agree.
about that, or do you know the actual like reason for that,
Um,
or should I explain also just to the audience in general regarding
Actually,
that?
you're more than welcome. I think you'll be able to articulate it probably better than I.
Yeah, so people also like to say Ghidorah, King Godzilla versus King Ghidorah isn't that good because of the time stuff, and like they'll cite that. However, in Godzilla versus Biollante, it's already shown that Godzilla can drop off their trackers like before, and they'll just appear randomly and they'll not even know why. So there's a precedent set for that in another film. So that's why continuity was good in the Heisei era. So the Futurians cite I want to say Kurosawa, but it's not Kurosawa, it's Terasawa.
I think it's Terasawa. Yep.
Terasawa's book, and he states that the original Godzilla and the new Heisei Godzilla are the same Godzilla, and like the birth of Godzilla and all that. So when they go back in time and they try to push the Heisei Godzilla, the Godzillasaurus, to stop it from becoming Godzilla, there was already nuclear testing where they pushed Godzillasaurus, so he mutates into the 84 Godzilla because the Godzillasaurus wasn't the 54 Godzilla. So they cause the events of Godzilla 84 to happen. And when they go back to irradiate the Godzillasaurus, the nuclear energy from the sub frees him of the anub from Godzilla versus Biollante, making him into Generation 2 Godzilla, Supercharged Godzilla, whatever you want to call him. And then that sets up for the rest of the films afterwards.
If I could give you an A+ for that explanation, I would, because that is, I think, the best explanation of the time travel story in that film that I've ever heard. So that's great. I've heard like bits and pieces of that before. Purely for me, my criticism of that film isn't in like that time travel piece. It's more so in the very vague politics. Because like when they try to incorporate the Futurians, like they kind of provide like some explanation of like the world dynamics. I think some of it is a little bit convoluted and wasn't really written that effectively. So that's my kind of qualm with that. But honestly, I would still rate, like it's weird because sometimes for me my favorites vary. Like I will go through phases where like Godzilla versus King Ghidorah might rise to my third favorite, but then it might fall back because whenever I watch the films again, I find new things that I appreciate or new things that maybe drive me bonkers. Like, to give you a criticism that I have of Godzilla versus Mothra, I get so annoyed over how stiff the marionettes look of Batra and Mothra.
Yeah, that's definitely one big criticism a lot of people say, especially compared to how EJ Tsuburaya had a very dynamic Mothra in Godzilla versus Mothra and even the original Mothra, which I would say the 64 Mothra marionette is like the puppet is probably the best out of the three.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
I think the reason why Godzilla vs. Mothra 92 gets the criticism it gets is because in the early Heisei era, like around Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, actually this started with like the kind of box office flop of Godzilla vs. Biollante. They were wanting to appeal to people's nostalgia, which fancy that's been happening since the early 90s because I know everybody's been criticizing that today. But they were really wanting to appeal to people's nostalgia, which is why they began with Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. And I mean, that film, it had like around the same performance as Godzilla vs. Biollante. But then
I heard it did a little bit better. Like
I think it did do
it was definitely what caused them to be like, well, we brought back King Ghidorah, so let's bring back Mothra, because King Ghidorah did pretty good.
Right. Like it did do a bit better, if memory serves, than Biollante. But then when they did Godzilla versus Mothra, they kind of took the nostalgia and amped it up quite a bit because I mean they use like a very similar storyline in certain aspects. The music in many ways was exactly the same, which I love personally. And they may have switched up Mothra's history a little bit.
Yeah.
But it really was essential. Like some have argued Mothra versus Godzilla 2.0, except more modernized at that time. I think that's why it gets some of the flack that it gets, because some people don't think that it is a fresh take. I like personally, I disagree because I mean the Mothra versus Godzilla had more of a nuclear narrative, whereas Godzilla versus Mothra focuses more on like environmental issues as a whole.
Yeah, I would say definitely 64 is a lot more of a critique of greed more than anything else. Like a lot of people say capitalism, I would say more greed than anything else, especially because it doesn't necessarily criticize the system, more or less how the system can be exploited by individuals for their own greedy purposes, because there are a lot of people within the system who work to keep it the way it is, but also to protect those most vulnerable in the society, and therefore in the system itself. And like I never really felt like the destruction on Infant Island was never as important necessarily in Godzilla versus Mothra the original. It's brought up as a point of it's brought up as a conflict with the Infant Islanders because that is the original reason why they do not want to help the humans fight Godzilla, but it's mostly the appeal to like just humanity rather than like we gotta save the world,
Mm.
guys. The environment's in danger, which I think is carried over a lot more in the Heisei films in comparison to the Showa films. So I think like it comes down to like how you read into the 64 film will depend on like how you criticize the later films. So I've always felt the argument that the environmental message in the Heisei film is not as strong in the 64 film. I would say, well, there wasn't really much one in the 64 film to begin with. So I would say it's a weak argument. First, that's just personally.
I would agree actually with that entirely.
Mhm.
And like I do feel like the environmental story in Godzilla versus Mothra 92 is a little all over the place.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, if we look at other environmental narratives in other Godzilla films, like Godzilla versus Hedorah, for
Mhm.
example, like I feel like it's much more consistent. Um, and I think the reason why that is I know that Godzilla versus Mothra really wanted to incorporate Batra, and as much as I love Batra,
Mhm.
I think that incorporating that third kaiju character took away from some of like the explanations and the dynamics behind the human characters.
Mhm.
Um, so additionally, like much of the film is battling. Like if you look at the final battle of that film, I think it's one of the longer final battles.
Mhm. That might have been why the film did a lot better than it did back then, because it definitely had a lot of nostalgic beats and then it had a really long final battle. However, to modern critics, I think they're one of the big criticisms they always have is that of the characters stand there and watch the final battle commence.
Mhm.
And do you think that's necessarily a problem actually to you that
Well,
like if like the character arcs of the humans are already like they've already reached their conclusion in the third act, do you think it's wrong for them to stand there and comment on spectacle, or do you feel that it is always necessary to have that part of the story be incorporated in the spectacle?
I don't mind it being incorporated. I mean, if you look at most Godzilla films, there are characters who are just like in awe, like of the sublime experience of watching these giant monsters, right?
Mhm.
I think a lot of the problem with the characters in that film specifically are they're I personally find them to be a little two-dimensional. They were really trying to focus on the marital issues between, oh, what are their names? Takuya and
Mm.
Masako, something. I think that's
Yeah.
their names. And like their daughter, and like I think it could have been more interesting, but if you like the fact trying to incorporate a story that complex from a human perspective, along with three monsters, delving into their histories, so on and so forth. That's a lot to do in a film. I think that film could have been longer. If it would have been like maybe 10, 15 minutes longer, they could have done a little bit more.
Mhm. It's like
My other gripe is that Miki Sagusa, she's my favorite human character. So I'm a little salty about Godzilla versus Mothra because I feel like they sideline her. Um, like she gets a brief moment where she's finding the cosmos,
Mhm.
but the rest of it is her just being like, "Oh, Godzilla. Oh, oh no." That's literally
Mm.
her only significance. Whereas in the prior two films, she had a very, very significant role. And in subsequent films, she had a huge role. So I think that if they would have focused the film more on Miki Sagusa, that would have been better. And if we would have gotten a little bit more on her connection with Mothra, then her being able to telepathically communicate with her in Godzilla versus Space Godzilla would have made a lot more sense. Like it would have been explained much more elaborately.
Would you say that the film kind of suffered from like because after King Ghidorah, a lot of the stuff regarding Godzilla versus Bagan and Mothra versus Bagan were kind of intertwined, and then we got Godzilla versus Mothra. Do you think that if Toho wasn't really concerned about whether or not a new monster would have done so well without like Godzilla there, that we maybe would have had more time to work on a better script, we would have gotten it? Or do you feel that like there was a different reason why the film ended up the way it was in terms of its weaker portions?
Well, I think that, I mean, because I know they had several ideas going on between Godzilla versus Biollante and Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, and
Mm-hmm.
I know, and I think that they just wanted to scrap all that just for nostalgia's sake. Like, I really feel like they were thinking, well, we tried to create an original character in Biollante, and that didn't pan out well, so they were like, let's just go back to our classics. Um, Again, I would argue at the time Godzilla versus King Ghidorah and Godzilla versus Mothra were well received. I think that it's the modern Godzilla fan, especially the American Godzilla fan, that seems to take issue with them, especially the latter film.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I just thought of something. I don't think I mentioned this yet, but I know one criticism that a lot of people give Godzilla versus Mothra is Godzilla kind of takes us is sidelined
Mm-hmm.
compared to Mothra and Batra. The primary conflict seems to be between them. And they're like, and I think that's another problem with the film. There were too many conflicts. There is man versus nature with regard to like the environment. There's man versus nature regarding the monsters. Godzilla versus Batra, two chaotic forces. Mothra versus Batra, one being a paragon of good, the other one being Earth's avatar.
I would say like that would be its lawful good versus chaotic good. Have you played
Something to
D&D?
I have, yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, that reference doesn't go over your head. I was gonna be like, you're gonna look at me like, what?
No, like that actually makes I like that analogy because that makes good sense.
Yeah, Moth is
Um,
definitely lawful good because she's definitely protecting the people. While Batch is like, for the greater good, damn it.
right. And I think that like there were so many different conflicts that I mean it was really difficult trying to focus on what was most important, you
Mhm.
know? And I think that's where it loses some people because if you look at the other Godzilla films, there might be like one or two types of conflict. But for that one, I just think they were really trying to build in that nostalgia by adding in elements from the original Mothra film and Mothra versus Godzilla, but they were also trying to adapt elements from the scrapped films. I think they were so eager to get something like this out and capitalize on their second most popular character that it seemed bigger than it should have been. Like
Yeah.
it was too much on their plate.
And I would say like that, if looking at Godzilla's history in retrospective, having wanting to do a lot and then having such a short time, especially during like the Heisei era too, the Heisei and the Millennium era, we see films that want to say a lot but end up saying very little, and a lot of things suffer for that.
Yeah. And I honestly, I think it's important to mention this too. If you've not watched the Japanese version of Godzilla versus Mothra in '92, I think it's important that you do. I know most of us only have access to the Americanized version, which is titled Godzilla and Mothra: The Battle for
Battle
Earth.
for Earth, yeah. Actually, let me see if I can find out. Keep talking, please.
Well,
Actually,
there is it's been so long since I watched the Japanese version, my bad. But the dialogue in the Japanese version, if you watch the subtitles, clarifies like some of the conflict.
yeah, I
So I
think
would
this
yeah,
is definitely the one a lot of people probably had this copy of.
that's the one I have too. If you watch it in the original language with the subtitles, like it elaborates. And I think that's probably why it performs better. Because the truth is dubbing takes a lot away.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we could get it like people debate all the time, like subbing versus dubbing, what's better, what's worse. I think if you're gonna really analyze or delve deep into something, you want to watch it in its original form, you know? Granted, sometimes, yes, subtitles can be inaccurate as well, but less frequently so than dubbing.
Yeah, and like even then, you're never gonna get a complete understanding of something unless unless you know the language yourself. And even then, you may not necessarily get cultural jokes or references unless you do a ton of research in that. Because I remember, do you listen to the Kaiju Apostle podcast at all by any
I
chance?
have a couple of times.
Yeah, in the recent War of the Gargantuas episode, so this is gonna plug for you, David. They were talking about this where like even dubbing, you're always gonna I mean, even in subbing, you're gonna lose a lot in that translation. And even then, like they're trying to get the effect of a phrase rather than its literal meaning, because its literal meaning may sound very slanted and it may not come out right. So it's a lot of a case it's about experience, which is always the nature of films, and maybe to the detriment of people who are always looking to read into films and analyze them. But I guess that's just kind of like what you have to deal with as a fan of foreign media to you.
Right. Like this kind of I don't know, this kind of veers into a different subject too, but that's actually one of my biggest criticisms of fans sometimes because I've always like I'm a very analytical person.
Mhm.
Maybe it's because I was an English major and that it's a profession, I don't know. But I always like looking at things through different lenses, looking at things from a deeper aspect, whether rather than just, oh, these battles are badass battles, you know, which it's okay to appreciate them and adore them. But I think, and I was mentioning this in Alyssa's stream too that we did a while back, I think we honor the films more when we take that extra step and look deeper. And I think sometimes fans don't take it that far, you know, especially if there's the option of watching dubbing versus subbing. I know a lot of fans who would just watch the dubbing versions of the films versus the subbed versions, which do allow for greater depth to be examined, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like there's always I don't want to get too far into like fandom critique because that's a whole other can of worms that I may have to get a ton of people in there to get their takes on it, because it definitely varies. But I think like the generalized view the fans don't take the thing seriously comes from either people who aren't really in the fandom, and I'm not trying to like gatekeep or anything specifically, but it's like fans who I watch the films, I like the films, and it's sort of like that postmodernist kind of unironic, it's so bad, it's good, kind of haha, let's laugh at it. I don't really take this seriously. I just watch it because it's fun for me, kind of people who have this opinion. And then you get them with people who may be trying to get into it and they give their takes, which may not be as educated as people who have watch these films in all their versions and really take the time to examine it. And because you just have so many people and you don't know what they're like, where they're coming from in their background or the intent behind how they phrase things, it it begs for homogenization in people's takes of the fandom. So again, I don't want to get too far into fan critique, but that's always been my observation of things.
Oh, I completely agree with you. And I think my issue is sometimes, and I've seen this happen to other people too, who are told that they are, oh, looking too literally or too analytically into something. I think a lot of it is like some people get uncomfortable with looking at things from different perspectives,
Mhm.
and they tend to shame other people when that happens. It doesn't happen all the time, and I don't expect everybody to cross-examine Godzilla films with a fine-tooth comb
Yeah.
necessarily. Like if they just want to watch it to enjoy it and enjoy the battles, that's completely understandable. I Many times I do that myself. But if somebody does want to examine something on a more analytical wavelength, I don't think there is enough justification to literally look at those people and be like, hey, you're looking too much into it. Like, don't be silly, you know?
Mhm. And I would also say that comes with the territory of if you're gonna give these takes, you're gonna have to provide visual or physical examples of it, like, oh, in the script it says here, so it can be implied here, or from how this scene's shot based on other evidence we know. Because and there's a lot of people who will like give their takes, and then when you kind of, I wouldn't say hound them about it, but you kind of dig deeper, you realize it's not necessarily about what they've seen. It's more about, well, this is my headcanon, and because of my headcanon, and we don't necessarily know, so this is what I'm giving you. And it's like, and then it comes to a point where it's like, well, I'm not trying to disrespect what your headcanon is, but
Mm-hmm.
if you want to examine it, are you gonna provide me some evidence
Oh
other
yeah.
than that? But I know I've been ignoring chat. I'm sorry, chat. I'm really sorry about that. Like Erica's got favorite Mothra incarnations. I know you stated yours first, like just really quickly, so we can go back to you, Donnie, and then I'll give mine because I have not even said what my favorite incarnation is.
So we're still. Wait, do you want me to talk about my favorite incarnation now?
Favorite incarnation.
Okay. My favorite incarnation is Rainbow Mothra from Mothra 3. Mostly because they make Mothra for the first time look pretty intimidating and imposing. Mothra is very sleek in that film. She looks more ready for battle. Her legs are a little bit longer, thinner. Her eyes look like they're intimidating in a way because they're slanted, and her antennae are like, well, actually his, if I should use the correct
Yeah.
pronoun. His antennae are slanted back. So he's definitely more of a battle ready Mothra. That's why I love that incarnation.
Mhm. And then I would say for myself, regular Mothra Leo would actually be my favorite incarnation of Mothra. I would probably say I'm looking at the image right now on my iPad. I like the green. Green's my favorite color, as you can see with the back of my room. And a lot of aspects of Rainbow Mothra are carried over from Leo, although Leo is a little bit fluffier, I would say, comparison to Rainbow Mothra, though I believe the patterning is the same, just Rainbow Mothra is a different color. But yeah, I like Leo, and that was actually a question you wanted to discuss was why Toho made Leo the Mothra for the Rebirth of Mothra trilogy male. Since obviously you posed the question to me in private, what would be your take to start us off?
Well, I like personally, I think changing Mothra's sex was a very divisive thing to do. Like it was very not divisive, but very radical change
Mm,
because most people identified Mothra as female, right?
yeah.
So I think they strictly did it just to kind of make the story more interesting. Because there's never been a male Mothra before. Like, what would a male Mothra be like? And I think that was intended to just draw the audience in. That's my interpretation.
Mm.
Um, do you have a stance on that? Do you have an interpretation?
This might be an issue on my due diligence because it had been a little bit of time since I've seen the Rebirth of Mothra films, although I do have the Blu-ray with all of them. How often is or do they call Mothra he in the movie itself? Because from my own recollection, I don't recall it. So for the longest time, I always thought Mothra Leo was just a name they gave the Mothra, and they were just all female because it's always been that way to
Mm-hmm.
me. So because I remember I never knew, like, before I even knew that all the Mothra films were connected, I thought Armor Mothra and Rainbow Mothra were different characters and they were female. And then Leo, I've heard Leo is a male name. So that's when I started thinking, oh, maybe it's a male Mothra?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Um, I think Leo is. I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, somebody in the future, or if you're watching this, correct me. I think Leo is supposed to be a representation of the word new in a way, kind of like Shin Godzilla. Like
Yeah.
Leo was kind of like new Mothra in a way. But if you watch the dubbed version, and I believe the subbed, or in the Japanese version, in the first film, they do refer to Mothra Leo as a he.
Mm.
But if you watch Mothra I think that it's been a long time since I watched Mothra 2 because that's the one I watched the least.
Wait, you don't like the Gara? You
I
don't like the
I
Baron
do love
fighting back?
Dagara. It's just the children drive me nuts in that film. um, so in Mothra 3, actually, I remember distinctly them referring to Mothra as a she. And then sometimes they just say it as well. So I think there's a lot of I think there were some inconsistencies with the writing from time to time. In my own fan fiction, yes, I write fan fiction. In my own fan fiction, I chose to just continue referring to Mothra Leo as a she because I personally, I don't know if I like the message it sends, changing one of the only female kaiju into a male. I feel like it defeats the purpose of Mothra being like one of the, like, being understood as being one of those only female representing
Actually, I think
monsters.
Machine Dragon Lair says the subtitles in 1 and 2 refer to Leo as he, but in Mothra 3, it's female pronouns.
Excellent.
So
So I
thank
was,
you to Machine Dragon Lair
thank
for
you.
saying that. So interesting.
Yeah.
And in a way, like, I know in the I know we just talked about Subverse dub. I know in the dub of Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, they say he for the Mothra larvae. So I would have to rewatch Ghidorah's subbed version to see if they say she or it or they in that, unless that like they were implying that that Mothra was male, because in that case, the Mothra in Aurora Horror the Deep would also be male if they are the same Mothra going by continuity wise.
Well, interestingly, and I'm glad that you mentioned that film specifically because I was during my master's program. I don't know. I had this like I always wanted to write papers about Godzilla stuff, so I was trying to find everything possible that I could write about, and I was writing a paper about how dubbed versions of Godzilla films try to impose gender on the monsters. Whereas if you watch like the Japanese versions, like for example in the original Godzilla, Godzilla is referred to as it continuously. I don't recall any instances until the Americanized version where he was referred to as a he.
Yeah.
In the dubbed version of Mothra versus Godzilla, there are moments where Mothra is either called it or he as well.
Oh, really?
Yes. So I really think that this is just a theory. I don't really have much proof. Like I could probably do some research and perform some analysis on it, but I really felt like back then in the 60s, they believed that American audiences probably wouldn't warm up to the thought of something female being that powerful, if that makes sense.
I
Like it
would
might be off-putting.
maybe, because I know definitely Rodan. Rodan, we know there are two Rodans, so that was the one time you could say there was the male and the female Rodan, because the Rodans aren't referred to neutrally in the Japanese sub of that film. So it may just I'm on like I would say probably due to like how different people were working with Toho and distributing the films, they weren't necessarily paying as much attention in those things. I would say in the case of Godzilla, especially with the moniker of King of the Monsters, it would probably obviously to coincide with King Kong. And when you think of Tyrannosaurus Rex, King of the Dinosaurs,
Right.
that kind of carries into itself there.
It's meant to build hype and
Yeah.
importance. And
And that's
I
another thing
like
with Leo, I would say. Leo, I know with like the original French, I think Leroy is a French name. Leroy, I think, means king. So King Mothra in a sense. So that might be something.
that's
But
super
that might be
interesting.
something you could do some analysis into, because I know in a lot of cases with Japanese, when they're with the Japanese, they won't just pull from American stuff, they'll pull from European countries as well, and the meanings that they have for certain words. Because I was thinking of Leroy, it was something from Dark Souls where they had a similar name and that had implications to it. But real quick in the chat, Kaimo Film says, Nathan, how many mics do you have? Oh yeah, no, that's not a mic. That's the light that's giving me this light background. That's the mic I'm using. This is the mic I have muted right now. So I look super disorganized. So I have two mics, one's muted, one's being used. So that answers that question.
I think you have a very lovely space though.
Thank you. I'm definitely like once big plans in the future. I will have to this will definitely be changing up soon. So that would definitely be ready for that. And hopefully my stuff looks kind of like yours. Yours looks super minimalist and I'm actually kind of jealous.
Well,
Yours
I
looks
just moved into this house and this is my office. If I had my camera, if I had my desk on the other wall, I do have like Godzilla stuff up here, but I have it like this because I like to have depth. Because my camera has a difficult time focusing like on close things up unless there's like depth behind me. So
yeah. Actually, Brandon Dave says, yeah, Leroy in Old French means the king. Yeah, because I remember, I'm not sure if you know Dark Souls stuff, but there's a character called Leroy the Paladin, and
I've heard of it.
yeah, there's an implication that like he like had associations with a king, so that's why I drew the connection specifically because Dark Souls was made from Soft. From Soft is based in Japan. You actually had really good questions. So, what do you think distinguishes Mothra from all other Toho characters aside from gender? Because that would be the easiest one, and we can get back into that into another part of this discussion.
Okay,
So,
so probably the most important thing that I think distinguishes her from the others is the fact that she's very calculated in the way that she acts. She doesn't act on instinct or anything like that necessarily. She's very calculated, and I think that her intelligence level outweighs her instinctual level in the sense that she can communicate on a human level in a way, right?
mhm.
Granted, we have seen Godzilla communicate on a human level before as well.
It would be after Mothra was introduced. So take that
Right,
for what you will.
right. Like Mothra doesn't act out of rage unless she has a specific reason to do so. Case in point, the first Mothra film and Godzilla versus Mothra 92 when she like attacks Tokyo because somebody steals her fairies, right? Or in Tokyo SOS where she makes the threat to humanity like, hey, if you don't stop playing God, I will involve myself and mess some stuff up, you
Mhm.
know? Like I that's why I think that she's more calculated. And whereas the other monsters, they might be motivated by like say nuclear radiation or they're drawn by another monster or whatever. That's usually their motivating factor.
Mhm.
Um, Mothra, I mean, definitely has more pacifist tendencies. Let's see. She's more of a defender than offensive. What's the correct word? I think that's the correct word.
Mhm.
And I think that distinguishes her. Uh, the fact that she is a parent. Um, she is very self-sacrificial. That is definitely a difference. Like I can't think off the top of my head other than maybe Rodan sacrificing himself in Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla 2, where another monster was self-sacrificial. Oh, Batra.
Oh,
Batra.
Batra also technically Rodan in 56 because of the first Rodan sacrificing himself to be with his mate. And even then, if we're gonna talk about the like monsters from that era, I would say outside of Godzilla and Anguirus, Rodan, Mothra, and Varan, Mothra definitely displays the greatest intelligence out of those three in particular. Rodan morely attacking out of territorialism, and Varan just kind of mopping about and doing Varan things.
Yeah, didn't
Varan
he
had
got angry because people were like messing with his lake,
he was just
right?
kind of no, he was just like he was there. He killed two people, and like then he decides then to pop out, and then he flies away, and then he's chilling underwater, and then people drop bombs on him, and then he goes to attack.
I need to revisit that film. I've only watched it like once or
Oh,
twice.
considering the common consensus of like how poor the film is, it's probably why you haven't gone
It's
back to that
sad.
film.
It's really sad though because when you look at Varen, he's a super
Hmm.
unique kaiju. Like,
Yeah, no, he's definitely interesting, but like I would say he suffered a lot from what happened to his film. Well, what happened to his show that became a film that later became a very poorly Americanized film. Like out of every monster, Godzilla King of the Monsters, despite taking out some of the allegory, still is rather respectful to its source material. Mothra's dub still very good. Rodan's probably better than the original in my own opinion.
mhm.
Um, but Varen's, when they had to cut up the footage that was there for the TV show and turn it into a movie that was black and white, when by this point a lot of other things were in color, definitely hampered him, and then we never saw him again. So
Yeah,
poor
sadly.
old Varen. Kaimo Film said, "Don't the Shobijin control Mothra to a certain degree?"
Um,
Um, you
I
could clarify that.
thinking of the different versions of the Shobijin, whether it's the Shobijin, the Cosmos, or the Elias, I really felt like they were more so their avatars representing Mothra's will. They can like they do have some individuality where they can like debate with Mothra or like maybe advise Mothra, but usually Mothra is the one that's like, this is what's going to happen. Like, here's a
Hmm.
few examples. Let's see. In Tokyo SOS, they literally were acting on the will of Mothra when they were conveying the threat that Mothra
Hmm.
made,
Yeah,
right?
they're definitely more priestesses and mediums between divine and mortal than
Mm-hmm.
controllers. Like I would say they're kind of, I don't like giving the anime films more credit than they're due, but like the difference between Mechagodzilla and Mothra is Mechagodzilla is controlled by those who are surrounded by him versus Mothra, who is not necessarily placated because Mothra isn't malevolent, but more appealed to as a deity.
Right.
And the same would go for Ghidorah in that film as well. But again, we will talk anime Mothra in a little bit.
Yes. Well, one other example too, before we move on from this subject, if you look at Mothra 3, the film of the Mothra trilogy, um, there's a scene where Maul is the only remaining Mothra fairy who isn't either captured or unconscious or evil or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And Mothra is literally like, I'm going to travel back in time and fight an ancient Ghidorah that I can probably defeat, hopefully. Maul debates with Mothra and is like, if you do this, you won't come back. Like literally, it's like, Mothra, this is like a death sentence. Mothra doesn't care. Well, Mothra persuades her otherwise. It's like, I'm going to do this. Like, I need your support me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's another one reason why I love the Mothra trilogy, because I feel like it fleshes out the relationship between Mothra and the fairies way more
Mm-hmm.
than other films.
Mm. Real quickly, Laggy Acra says, gotta go by. I didn't get to talk too much. I have to take care of my sick dog. Of course, I hope your dog feels better, my dude. And
Oh.
thank you for coming in though, and for supporting me. You're always a good supporter. So thank you very much. We're both very grateful.
At some point, I'm going to pronounce that name correctly because I know in the last stream that I did, I really slaughtered
Yeah,
it.
Laggy Acris. That's
Lagiacris.
yeah. Monster Hunter be have some weird names. Before hopefully he'll watch the rest of this. You should have gone with Rathalos, my dude. Everyone knows Rathalos, so there you go. But I do hope your dog is gets better, my dude. Um, Real quickly, I love Varen and managed to get an X plus of him. Most of the movie's pretty forgettable though. That is very true. I want to get I wish they had a Bandai Varen. I'm a big Bandai guy. I like collecting my 6-inch plastic. I've never been an X plus person. So do you collect it all? Like a
um,
lot?
I used to collect a lot, but over the past like several years, I haven't. Mostly because of all the moving around that I've been doing, moving from like because I went and did my master's, I moved there, I came back. Um, I haven't had the space in which to collect, if
Mhm.
that makes sense. And my problem is I'm an overgrown 5-year-old and I still like to sometimes take them out and play around with my figures when really I should be, preserving them and saving them
You
and
should be
not
like, put them there, just be like, oh, and it looks exquisite. Look at how that
exactly.
figure is standing right there. Don't worry, I'm the same way, although I'm younger, so I guess that justifies me doing it, but I'll probably be the same way. I mean, I've got like all like the big figures that I really like out there above my bed, so you're fine. You don't need to feel shame.
Thank you. I appreciate that validation.
And Sean Clifford quickly asked, "Will Dai ever bring Gamera back?" So a quick side note. So your thoughts on Gamera?
I love Gamera. Love Gamera to pieces. The Gamera trilogy, the 90s Gamera trilogy are some of my favorite films because they're so dark and grungy, and I would love to see more Gamera films like that because I thought they
Mhm.
did very, very well. Um, I hope they bring him back. I think that it would be really a poor decision not to because I feel like kaiju films are making a comeback
Mhm.
with the success of Shin Godzilla, new Ultraman stuff, so on and so forth.
Oh,
Like,
Ultraman's never gonna die.
oh,
Don't
I
worry
know,
about that.
never ever. I think that this is actually the perfect time to bring back Gamera, and
Mhm.
well, I feel like we've been waiting 1,000 years for that.
Mhm. Yeah, I would like I like the Heisei Gamera films, although like not to be hipster, but I think it's such a frozen like absolute zero level take to say I like the Heisei films because everybody and their mom, their brother, their pet, everyone says I love the Heisei Gamera trilogy in one language or another. So it's like I would love
Hmm.
to see Gamera back, although I think because of like how much people have been hyping up the Heisei trilogy, if the next Gamera film isn't anywhere close to like perfection, there's gonna it will be a King of the Monsters scenario all over again. There will be people who will praise it until it dies because they have been Heisei Gamera or die in the fandom for years at this point. And then there'll be people thinking it's okay, the moderates, and then there'll be people being like, "This is the worst thing ever. It's not Heisei trilogy. Why? No." But that's really quickly my own take when it comes to Gamera.
That's like I completely agree. Like I feel like there is pretty significant consensus on people loving that trilogy.
Mhm.
Um, and like I really wish that like I have moments in the back of my mind where I wish that the Mothra trilogy had been approached in a similar way the Gamera trilogy had been.
Yeah.
But I know they were looking at who their target audience was for the Mothra trilogy, and they wanted it to be a younger audience.
Mhm.
Um, but I also think that I feel like the bar has been set very high by that
Mhm.
trilogy. So people are going to be looking at like, okay, is this going to add up? Is this going to be as good? Um, whereas I think for Godzilla, like the last few, like especially Godzilla Final Wars, as much as we love it,
Mhm.
it was not successful.
Yeah.
Definitely not successful. And I think the bar was relatively low by the time we got Shin Godzilla.
Mhm.
Um, and it was a drastically fresh take on
Mhm.
Godzilla, which is why I think it set so well.
It was drastically different, but also very respectful and very closely tied to what Godzilla is at its core. Like I would say like the anime films were very drastic, but like the consensus on those films is far different. Which perfect segue leads me into what is your thoughts about Anime Mothra, in your opinion?
Well, okay. First, let me convey that I actually did enjoy the anime trilogy.
All right, I'm
I
kicking out
understand.
of stream now. Get out. No.
Oh, open the door for me. I'm kidding.
Get out of here.
Um, no, don't get me wrong. Like, I do think there are problems.
Mhm.
Like it's far from perfect. I enjoyed the experimental aspect of the trilogy. Am I salty that Mothra really didn't appear? Oh hell yes. Like I that last movie I was like, Mothra is going to appear. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be a battle. Godzilla, Mothra, Ghidorah. Like, yes.
It's GMK all over again, baby.
No Mothra. I ended that film. I was like, okay, it was interesting. But considering Mothra was a shadow and like a hallucination, I was annoyed.
It's very weird because I have looked at forums when it came to translations regarding the anime film's prequel books and how Mothra has been betrayed in those because she directly fought with Godzilla and technically beat Godzilla, and then it's the moving of the egg, which leads to the Hotwa people 20,000 years into the future.
Mothra defeated Godzilla in the... Really? I didn't know that.
Well, like again,
Finally.
essentially every monster appears in the anime trilogy prequel books, and it was after Bachara was killed. I might be getting the timeline wrong, but then Mothra appears, and they thought Mothra was Bachara, and then Mothra ends up sort of pushing Godzilla back and stopping him from attacking something, and then they find a piece of Godzilla, and they're like, "Oh wow, Mothra is awesome." And then Godzilla ends up killing the original Mothra, but the egg is transported to Tokyo with a few people who are living kind of in balance with Mothra, which is what leads into the Hotwa people in the future.
Wow.
However, how the Hotwa interact with the egg that's been there for 20,000 years at this point, or we assume it's the same egg because how the egg is set up in the book makes you imply that or infer that technically. But then it's like they appeal to Mothra so Mothra can appear in visions to stop Ghidorah. It seems like a lot of people praise the anime film for its story, which, in my opinion, gives me cause to critique it a little harsher. And I would say that Mothra's distinctly unique ability to go into dreams feels constructed purely to combat the Exif. And it feels like you really wanted to ride themes a little too much, in my opinion, and it ended up feeling extremely contrived when it came to monster related stuff for me.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned it being contrived because I agree completely. Like it initially, like because the trilogy is largely centered on like religious themes, like spirituality. Like there's these these religious factions associated with each kaiju, right?
With the exception of Godzilla being the odd one out in that scenario.
Yeah, he's like the wild card in a way because there are different groups or alien groups associated with the different kaiju with their own motivations, their own intent. And I thought that was really refreshing from the get-go, but I think at a certain point it started getting a little predictable.
Yeah.
And I think that if they would have made it a little bit more suspenseful and provided a little bit more context, it would have been like the experiment would have paid off, in my opinion. But there was a lot of context we didn't get.
Yeah, like a lot of like the time for anime talk now. I'm gonna have to I need to get more people in to talk about certain films. But like for example, I'll just start off with Abella Saludo. Their whole shtick was that they wanted to take over the Earth, but they had fought with the humans for years. So I think the motivation for them to want to rule over humanity instead of just living amongst humanity seems more that, oh, let's go off the nostalgia of the Black Hole Planet 3 aliens with Mechagodzilla. And I also feel the whole Mechagodzilla city feels rather contrived because of how especially they built up Bella Saludo technology being very good, but then Mechagodzilla is the one exception that doesn't act the way they want it to. And they say, like, they'll say in one line, Mechagodzilla never activated, and then other times they'll say it activated, but it didn't do anything. But then after Godzilla destroyed the facility, that somehow activates Mechagodzilla to then build Mechagodzilla City. It just seemed like they were playing fast and loose with what actually happened to support the plot moving forward in that. And I feel if the premise being Mechagodzilla itself is that weak, the rest of the film feels worse, a lot worse, in my opinion.
I think it comes back to context though, because like we are at a point like in the first film where we discover like this is 20,000 years later due to space travel, and there's so much we didn't know about what happened before. Like there are bits and pieces of flashbacks, so on and so forth, but to the audience, like we don't get enough puzzle pieces to put the picture together. And that, I think, is what was problematic. Additionally, I also believe that the slightly underwhelming battles also didn't sit well with a lot of people, me and myself included.
Like, I know people would say, well, it helps with Godzilla's character. He's so large, so his lethargic nature helps the context of the story. And then I would just be like, well, he's so big, yet there's nothing to compare him to for that size. So what's the point of making him that big? Like, he's hyped up as this big, really big deal, but it's very underwhelming in that nature.
Well, and very fleeting too. Like I will commend the trilogy for going the extra mile when it comes to its human characters, although I do think at times they are a little contrived from time to time myself. But like I can commend the effort that they make. I just think that it didn't mesh well with the overall concept and what they were trying to achieve.
I know certain sources have stated that the film was originally going to be a TV series, like an anime series, because I know the guy who wrote it wrote Psychopaths, and Psychopaths are really good anime. If you've seen it, have you seen
I have not.
Yeah, it definitely tackles a lot of difficult and adult themes, and so you've got capable hands, but I do not think necessarily that they pulled off a good movie necessarily.
Yeah, I agree that it definitely could have been. Like I feel like it would have been better if it were a series, because I love series because it does allow you to build in a lot of context.
Yeah, I would say like that's the one thing that Ultraman benefits from the most, is that you have a lot of series that have a lot of built up continuity to them, which allows you to explain a lot and not have to explain much. Which this is gonna be a question for you specifically, Donnie, but hypothetical Shusei Kaneko Gamera trilogy thoughts.
So if you were to direct a Mothra trilogy, sign me up. Because I really like the fact that he approaches things from a very dark perspective. I mean, if we look at Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, All Out Attack, which he also directed, like it really kind of reframed our idea of Godzilla, but it also incorporated more like dark undertones to it. I would love that.
It actually do you think Godzilla or G.K. would benefit more from having its original cast, or are you a live or die with Mothra being in that film? I'm trying to see how dedicated you are to Mothra. Let's see.
I would have loved to see who was it? It was supposed to be
Baragon and Anguirus.
Okay.
The Baragon stays, but Anguirus replaces Mothra in that scenario.
I'm gonna stay dedicated to Mothra because one of the most their second most popular character. Like it probably was a financial decision as to why they chose to include.
It was definitely
Ghidorah. I think that she provides a drastic contrast to the others. Whereas if we look at the original three, I feel like they would have to work harder to provide that crucial contrast that they would have with Mothra in the mix.
I think Mothra definitely provides the contrast, and I know in the original script, the original three were definitely all picked because they were very similar as all prehistoric reptiles. So I would say Mothra definitely provides the element that you think she adds to that. So you stay dedicated to Mothra, so that's commendable.
Always loyal.
Brandon quickly says, if you can ever call that thing Mechagodzilla, it felt like they wanted to do something new for the sake of being something new without much of anything behind it. Yeah.
Yes.
like the Godzilla versus the Asuka Fortress unmade film.
Mhm.
Just call Mechagodzilla the Asuka Fortress, and there you go. You get to bring back an old concept, and people would probably not be as mad. Because I know
Well, we were all waiting to see Mechagodzilla. Like,
it
we
was
saw.
it was definitely advertised as Mechagodzilla's return, and I know people say, "Well, you can't fault advertising." No, you most definitely can fault advertising.
Oh, yeah,
If you are
like,
falsely advertised, you have every right to be upset about that. It's a weak. I think it's a weak argument and a dismissive one to try to just say, "But my advertising." But
agreed.
that's just me. Also, we haven't gone. We've looked at themes a little bit, but like the themes of Mothra. This is sort of hybridizing one of the questions you had. What would you say the top three most important themes for Mothra? I know you had several, but I would say the three most important, aside from design, that make Mothra what she is.
Oh, let's see. Um, I think one theme that really defines Mothra, especially in I think Tokyo SOS really did a great job helping us understand where Mothra stands in conjunction with humanity. I like that Mothra is, in a way, a gatekeeper of the boundary between life and death, if that makes sense. Like, she has the authority in her deity identity to be able to say, hey, humans, like, this is a boundary you can't cross. If you cross it, slap, you know?
I just
I,
like how you said that. If you don't like slap. Um, There's always been, before you get to the other ones, there's always been like the idea that Mothra is reincarnated to a degree, specifically in the Monsterverse, that um, all the memories can carry over into
Mhm.
the newer incarnations. Um, it
Well,
would be interesting to explore how someone who's faced with Mothra being that gatekeeper could accuse her of being someone because you live outside of life and death to a degree. What right do you have to sort of govern it when you can't experience it like we can?
well, it could be also interpreted through the perspective that she uniquely understands life and death because she experiences it so much.
Over and over
Right.
and
The
over.
Mike Doherty, the director, like, when they were doing, like, the live viewings of the films, he said for King of the Monsters that Mothra doesn't fear death because she's had to face it, and she knows that she'll come back from it because that's in her nature. And looking back at Tokyo SOS, I think that's why Mothra does take such a firm stance on, like, I understand what it means to die and to be alive, and for me, it's natural. Why would humans go and create something unnatural and force something out of its natural cycle
Mhm. I would
against
say
its will?
yeah, I think the main thing is it's against its will. Like here, you definitely like shows that it doesn't necessarily want to be alive anymore. Although for us humans, like death is something that we fear a whole lot. So it's natural for fellow humans to think, I don't want to die. I really would like to keep living. But I think like definitely the ideas of nature and the cycle are integral to that, especially with Mothra. And she's a stronger character for being able to face death, not fear it, but not be arrogant or aggressive because knowing that, oh yeah, I can just keep coming back over and over again. What you gonna do about it? It's very much like it's very understanding. And you definitely, I'd say for people to, if we could experience that, that kind of fortitude is definitely something I would say.
Right. Yeah, I agree completely. I've often thought, like, because I have so many fan fiction ideas. I have thought of writing a fanfic where humans tried to do with Mechagodzilla or with Mothra what they did with Mechagodzilla and reviving her after she's dead.
Mm,
Um, I've wanted to explore, like, the ramifications of that. What would a revived Mothra be like?
mhm.
Um,
Not just like a Mecha Mothra, but like a Kiryu Mothra. I guess we don't have a term for like specifically what kind of like a cyborg Mothra.
Right. Like I don't want to call it like zombie Mothra, but like just some sort of
But in a sense,
artificially.
like the classical fear or horror of the zombie is the perversion of life in a sense, and what you're kind of going for is definitely what that would be for Mothra, because you are indeed perverting a cycle that
Right.
Mothra lives in.
And the most grievous atrocity humanity can do is take something that represents and embodies the cycle of life and detract from it in some way. And I just always thought that would be a super interesting story. So I'm gonna probably write that. Nobody steal that idea. I'll
Do
be
not
watching.
do not steal, guys. That I think that is actually a very interesting idea. I've never thought of that before. So
I mean, you can steal that idea if you collaborate with me. Then we can.
no, no, don't worry. I have my ideas from Mothra that I definitely need to write up myself. So don't worry. That is yours and yours.
Well, it would be fun to write a joint fanfic one of these days, though. I think that people don't collaborate enough.
Yeah, no, there are definitely people who are looking to collaborate more in the community. I've definitely seen that a lot more with people joining up, doing stuff. So I'd say there's a lot more cooperation than there has been, especially because of like the uniting information we have as fans.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And since we've talked a little bit about Tokyo SOS, before we get into the next two big themes from Mothra, do you think hypothetically, if Godzilla had not returned, that Mothra could have beaten Kiryu in a fight if she did declare war on Japan?
I hmm. That's an interesting. I think it's possible that she could have won through like if she were to use her strategy and understand that, oh, these aircraft are actually
Mm,
controlling him. If she like destroyed those or attacked the point
dead.
of, yeah, then you know.
Mhm.
Not to mention Kiryu really didn't handle physical combat, or at least being knocked over very well.
Yeah.
I think she could knock him over, but I mean, I don't know how effective his weapons would be, because we saw at the beginning of the film that missiles, she could detonate them with her scales, right?
Mm,
I feel like if she were to be run down gradually, he probably could defeat her.
yeah.
Um, but it really depends. It really depends on what type of strategy she would use, in my
Mm.
opinion.
And it also kind of made me wonder if Kiryu wouldn't even fight to begin with, because we already know Kiryu won't accept Godzilla kill orders. So who's to say that if Mothra is looking to sort of return Kiryu and let him essentially die, that he would just be like, okay, nope, I'm going. See you
And
guys.
feasibly, what if Mothra could communicate with him in a
That
way?
is true, yeah.
Um, so like that would be interesting, though.
Hmm. Because like, and I'm thinking about this right now, it's that Kiryu could communicate with people to a degree. So who's to say that he couldn't communicate with Mothra? So think of
Exactly.
that as you will. And my brain's so scatterbrained. I'm so scatterbrained at times. I just thought of
You're
another,
not
it's another
scatterbrained.
community, it's another continuity thing regarding the Heisei series. I think we can almost definitely confirm that it's Mothra's fault Space Godzilla exists, because it's the fairies who return in Space Godzilla. So
Hmm.
in a way, while Mothra is dealing with stuff in space, she is atoning for her mistakes by
Thank
informing them of
you.
Space Godzilla's return. I never thought of that until now,
I'm
but
glad that you said
that
that,
just
because
cleared up my mind.
you were the only other person who is kind of pieced that together. Because most other people that I debate that with are just like, no, it's Biolante. And I'm just like, how would Biolante get deep enough into space?
Hmm.
Like, I mean, at the end of the film, we see that Biolante is just like floating in the ether around the Earth,
Yeah.
you know? Um, and I guess that would make more sense as to why the Cosmos actually do
Yeah, because
return.
it had been Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla 2. It had been a whole movie between Mothra and Space Godzilla, and Mothra had not appeared in Mechagodzilla 2, so it makes me wonder why return now and not have, and like Biolante's only mentioned like once. And I think that's just because Biolante had already been made from Godzilla cells to begin with, so there was precedent for it to happen. But since Space Godzilla shares little to no traits with Biolante aside from maybe the tusks on the side of the mouth, that may be the only reason why they thought of Biolante and the fact that it's into space.
Right. And if we look at Space Godzilla's abilities, he has a lot of like very psionic
Yeah,
properties like what Mothra has.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that, yeah, again, that just came to my mind. And I remember people always say, well, continuity doesn't mean anything in the Heisei series. And then people always say, oh, Space Godzilla is one of the worst in the Heisei series. And I'm like, and they'll say, oh, why are the Cosmos here? So it just sort of went Jimmy Neutron brain blast, my guy.
Like I don't think any of the films in the Heisei era are dismal films. Like I
Yeah,
think
no,
that they're all I enjoy all of them.
I enjoy every Godzilla film, but I would even say the Heisei films have their issues, maybe a lot more than the other films, but they are still very decent films. A lot more
Yeah.
than people give them credit for.
Yeah. I
But
love the continuity of
oh
them.
yeah, no, continuity is always good. Never doubt continuity. But super brief aside, what would you say the next big theme for Mothra would be? Because we mentioned the circle of life and sacrifice for the first one. So what would you say second one is?
So I would say so when I'm looking at these themes, I'm looking at them from a personal standpoint, considering she's my favorite character and what the character's done for me over the years. Um, Another theme that I have interpreted in Mothra is the significance of determination, even when you were up against what seems to be impossible odds.
Hmm.
This becomes very apparent, especially in the Mothra trilogy. Mothra ends up being up against ridiculous
Yeah,
scenarios.
she's essentially always outclassed in size and strength in both Death Ghidorah, Grand King Ghidorah, Dagara.
Yeah, I like Des Ghidorah is my favorite Ghidorah, by the way. I don't
Oh,
know if I
really?
ever my favorite
I
because he seemed to be this like most imposing, violent. I
Mhm.
mean, until like maybe later incarnations, but um, the way he battles with Mothra in that film is brutal. Like he
Mhm.
makes Mothra bleed. We literally never witness Mothra bleeding until we get to this 1996 kids movie.
Yeah, he makes the what's it called? He makes one of the big five bleed.
Yeah.
And like I would say every member of the big five has gotten bloody at one point. Godzilla, Rodan, Ghidorah,
Oh
and
yeah.
Mothra.
Well,
Skate Mothra.
I remember when I was watching Rebirth of Mothra, the first film. Like I was like, oh, this is gonna be a kids' film. It's gonna be, and then suddenly Des Ghidorah like starts eviscerating the Mothra Leo baby, and
Mhm.
wh-
No, do it, baby.
I'm just like, what's happening right now? Like I literally, when I first watched it, I was like mortified. I'm like, oh,
Yeah, no, he definitely does a number on Mothra for sure. I would say though, interestingly that you say Death Ghidorah is your favorite. Hyper King Ghidorah Type 3 or Grand King Ghidorah is my favorite Ghidorah in terms of design. I just really love how he looks in
yeah,
Rebirth of Mothra 3. It's ironic that Godzilla's arch nemesis, my favorite incarnation, is even from a Godzilla movie.
oh yeah.
So,
I
like,
love that though.
ironically enough, Rebirth of Mothra 3 was from 1998. So, like, you had a really good, really good Mothra and King Ghidorah, but Godzilla, no.
Yeah. I think that's the strongest film out of the three.
It's also the
Um,
one people remember the most, maybe because it was the end of the trilogy and King Ghidorah, more classical King Ghidorah, was the antagonist.
it's much darker. Like
Mm,
I think when they made the third Mothra film, they were looking at the Gamera trilogy, being like, we need to reassess.
and ironically enough, this was even before Gamer 3 had come out at that point, so they were definitely going in the direction of the trilogy before the trilogy got really dark in Gamer 3
Oh
itself.
yeah, like I think Gamera 2 was sufficiently dark. The
It
first
was
one,
that was
mm,
the most lighthearted out of them, but it still had its moments, especially with oh god, what's I was about to say Infant Island, but no, that's not Infant Island.
oh,
The Gauss Island, you know what I'm talking about
yeah, I
though,
know what you're
right?
talking. I can't remember the name
Yeah.
though.
Oh,
It's been a while
damn that
since I've watched that film too. Shame on
that's gonna keep me up all night tonight now that I forgot that.
me.
Oh, god damn it.
Yay! Finally, I'm not the only profane one.
Ah,
Cheers to that.
if I had a drink, I would definitely cheers to that. Ah, come on. I'm gonna have to watch one of those movies tonight so I can just feel good about myself and remember that. Ah, no.
I could research it really quick.
Yeah, please do. Cause oh, why? Why did I forget that? And while you're researching that, I can look up some I can look at the chat real quick.
It's Himagame Island.
Himagami Island, thank you, because I know Professor Nagamine was the professor in Gamera in the trilogy, and it sounded similar to her name, so thank you.
Mhm.
But Machine Dragonlayer said this is actually good stuff for my Tokyo SOS follow-up fanfiction. Definitely get in contact with Donnie so you guys can do some collab on that. That would be some really good stuff. But final big final theme, my man, out of the three.
Okay, so the first one was the life cycle. The second one was um
The underdog essentially for the second one.
right. The third one, let's see. I feel like the third theme would I think the best theme for that would be probably I feel like Mothra really believes in humanity. Um, Mothra acknowledges humanity, whereas the other kaiju really don't. They look at humanity as being something that can be conquered or just something that's an annoying nuisance. Mothra acknowledges that mankind is an intelligence of its own and ultimately believes that they'll do the right thing, even though they often don't.
Mhm. I would say definitely that exemplifies the deification of Mothra as a character and, excuse me, um, with the Eiji Tsuburaya being of, Catholic background and he worked on the special effects for Mothra, and I do not know how much of the themes from the original Mothra are carried over into the later stuff, but especially with 64 in particular, um, the idea of a benevolent God and thinking the best for us is definitely would be in line with his roots specifically.
Mhm.
And I would say that that definitely has become ingrained into the character. And maybe a lot of people may not realize that, but that is definitely like it's an appealing theme for you. And I think it's an appealing theme for a lot of us that makes Mothra a lot different than any of the other monsters. I would say the closest to that is King Caesar to a degree, but that's more of him
Or maybe Gamera
specific
too.
camera to a degree, but like in the Godzilla series, I
Oh,
would say
right.
Caesar, but he's mostly just defending a certain group of people rather than Mothra, who has a more broader view of humanity.
Yeah, for him, it's defending a family,
Mhm.
notably, yeah.
And like a people group, the Okinawans in
Yeah,
general.
like, people sharing, like, a certain belief.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that belief defends like manifests and defends them. While with Mothra, it's definitely a lot more grander view of humanity. And that also exemplifies her duality with Batra because in a lot of different religions, there is the idea like how God interacts with us, and it's either fire or brimstone with Batra, while with Mothra, it's a lot more benevolent, and there's a relationship which depending on the religion is exemplified with both moths. So
Mhm,
I would say like definitely Mothra does have a very unique relationship with humanity, and it's definitely exemplified in a lot of her influences. So
Yeah, I
that
agree.
that like I never thought about it that much to a degree, but like now in like live stream format, which is a blessing, it lets me kind of think about that in a broader sense.
Well, and I think that's what makes these live stream conversations so interesting is because like there are things that we both we may not have framed things in a certain way to understand
Mhm,
them from different perspectives. So like I mean, I've been understanding things from different perspectives based on this conversation too.
mhm.
So it's refreshing.
It's like it allows you to have that stream of consciousness that a video does not, because you're always trying to edit out the video and make sure it fits what you're trying to say, and you say what you want to say in the best way possible, which like a video can't do what a live stream can do when it comes to like your thought process.
Hmm.
Like
Exactly.
this is why I'm thankful, and I'm thankful also to the people who are listening to this now and the people who will view this later on, that it really helps you think things in a completely different light, and segueing, transitions are weird, into a different light. Fan fiction for you. We've established what Mothra's themes are generally. How has this channeled into your writing? So if you have work that you would want to share, you can explain it and sort of how you incorporate themes, especially as someone who teaches creative writing.
So I don't like I know you said we could do a share screen,
Mhm.
so I'm gonna at least share let's see. Is it working?
It did you share the screen? Let's see.
Okay, so I if let's see. It's this screen that I want to share. I don't know if you can see it on your end or not.
Oh wait, screen share. No, I do not. I do not see the screen.
Oh wait, whoops. I clicked the wrong thing.
Don't worry about it. Also, Brandon also said it. Teammate on Anime. Thank you for that. Donnie looked it up, and Brandon also made sure to clarify. Thank you
All
very
right,
much.
I finally figured out the tech. All right,
There
now can
we
you
go.
see it?
Yep, I can see it there.
Okay.
Perfect.
So so to preface this a little bit, I still own a website called Kaiju Galaxy, and it's kind of like it's titled the home of kaiju creativity, where people can submit fan fiction, fan art, fan poetry, reviews, all sorts of different things. And I wanted to just give people an outlet to write things and to
Mhm.
be artistic in the Godzilla fandom. And that's how I largely like I just wanted to create a repository for that type of thing. So for my own fan fiction, I used to write um, a lot of Godzilla fan fiction starting way back in like year 2000. That's so 20 years ago. My God. Um,
It's like essentially my life.
oh God.
Now you feel old.
I do. But I kind of, as I've grown as a writer, I've reinvented my own series because I used to write a lot about like the human characters. My stories focus a lot on humans that have like psychic abilities because I really loved Miki Sagusa and I wanted to kind of go into that background, like how did humans originate in having psychic powers? How does that relate to the kaiju? So on and
Mhm.
so forth. So I used to write stories where I would use like my name and my friends and we would all be characters. And then I got to a point where I was like, that's super zany and ridiculous. I'm going to be much more serious now. And I decided to reinvent my series. And I start with a story called Godzilla, A Heart Ruptured. And it is a follow up from Godzilla versus Destroya, where basically my goal in this story is to bridge the Heisei Godzilla films and the Mothra trilogy together. Because for some reason, I've always been just super annoyed that those aren't bridged together.
Mhm. And
Um,
even then, like, a lot of people always bridge them together anyway, probably because, like, they were using very similar, like, props, and it was around the same time, but then Toho was like, "No,
Oh
we want
yeah,
it
like
different."
people assume it, but then they have the cruel realization of like, oh, this isn't the same Mothra, this isn't the same story. What's going on?
Mhm.
So like that's the premise of my universe. If you ever want to like visit the site or even go to the forums, you can register to become a member. It's just a message board. We do like story conversations. You can present your ideas, get feedback. We do tournaments, so on and so forth. Shameless plug. for Kaiju Galaxy.
If you put the link in the private chat for us, I can link it in the live chat here. So then people for like after like in the chat now, and then once the stream's over, can go through it from there.
Yep, perfect. There's the forum link.
Thank you, and I will put that in the chat for you for
And
your
the
consumption
website
while you
link
guys.
too. There's that. So like since I'm gonna have time over the summer, because school is gonna be done here in a little bit for me, I will be probably putting out requests for people to submit things. So if you are a writer and you do want some of your stuff to get put out there, I'm very huge on promoting other people. So if you ever want to reach out, you can either reach out on my YouTube channel or you can reach out via email. Anyway, like I will endeavor to get back with you. But
definitely, I'm gonna have to like get like a bunch of people stuff because I know there's a lot of people doing promotion stuff. There's people on Instagram doing stuff. People on Discord. I need to like kind of. I want to probably make a video in the future that encompasses where everyone's kind of doing stuff and maybe kind of network it where, oh, here's a link to other places, but they're all kind of they have their way, so you can sort of zigzag around other places so people
yeah, kind of like an archive of
an archive and a network essentially in and
well,
of itself.
and that's why I value this so much because, like, I was telling Alyssa this before, like, I never really identified myself as a kaiju YouTuber because on my YouTube I talk about a variety of different things.
Mhm.
But being able to participate in these types of conversations is valuable because it does build bridges. It allows for collaboration and really good conversation like this to happen. But I am digressing heinously because your original question was about how Mothra's themes have kind of been transitioned into my stories. To answer that question, most of those themes are very much apparent. However, I have made Mothra a little bit more powerful, mostly in the sense that she very much reflects the power level that she has in the Mothra trilogy. Like, she's not going to come into a battle, flap her wings, and then get blown up like we are used to, seeing in the recent movies. Um, but she's definitely like the version of Mothra that I created. It's called like she's called Mothra Virgo because I had like this whole astrology thing where like I believed that Mothra Leo, like they were trying to like embed some sort of like astrological progression of the Mothra, you
Mm,
know?
yeah.
So my Mothra she doesn't put up with crap. She is a little diplomatic, but she is not afraid to be like, humans, like this is not happening right now. Definitely much more rebellious than Mothra normally is.
Hmm. Oh, that's
So,
interesting. That's definitely interesting. And I also want to quickly say Bobby Reynolds says, "Hi guys,
hey,
Bobby.
Bobby, good
How
to
you
see
doing, man?
you.
I saw you in the After Dark stream for Monstrosity, so it's good to see you in here, my guy. Thank you very much. Was a more rebellious Mothra kind of what you were always wanting to go for, or like did you want to go? Were you ultra piece of pacifist Mothra at first?
Well, like this, like I guess this Mothra still has like some pacifist tendencies, but I always felt like Mothra held back a lot, and I really wanted to give the monsters more personality that distinguishes them from their original versions that we see in the films. Like in my series, like for example, Godzilla A Heart Rupture takes place before the first Mothra film. So uh, of the Mothra trilogy. So
Mm.
that Mothra that appears in that is actually the mother Mothra that we see in the first film of the Mothra trilogy.
Interesting.
Um, and throughout the first part of my series, we see Mothra Leo, and we get to kind of witness Mothra Leo's existence more so developed, and then Mothra Virgo, who is the offspring of Mothra Leo. Um, but my goal for my series is to kind of provide more historical context. Like at a certain point, will be going into detail about the the nation that the Elias, like Mothra's fairies, comes from, like the extinct nation, why Mothra was brought into existence, so on and so forth. Um, Just I like world building, and that's kind of my way of taking a world that exists and expanding on a little bit
Mhm.
more.
Oh, no, trust me, I love world building. It's like I always have to mention my girlfriend in almost every stream, but, like, I help a lot with her world building. She's very much good at her prose, and she's good with characters, but, she does always need a little bit of help here and there, and I love world building, and I'll always think of things that she may not necessarily have thought of when it came to world building, which is my specialty, and I'm very much happy to kind of be the yin to her yang in that sense.
You guys are so cute.
Oh, I get
Ah.
I love her. She's the best person to me.
Well,
Oh,
I think you both are really awesome people, and I think that, like, I really value the fact that you were very open about that with one another too. Like, you really demonstrate appreciation for one another, and I think that that's refreshing.
I would say, like, it's generally not something you get to see a lot modern and, like, these days, especially, like, this isn't gonna be Zim's relationship talks, you guys, so don't worry about that, but it's very definitely much like I like my public affection, and she very much likes the affection, so it's very much that completing loop and that never-ending energy that I really appreciate about how we are together. So it works out perfectly for us, and our interests align in the most glorious ways. So
I have a similar
it's
dynamic with my
perfect.
partner. Unfortunately, he doesn't like Godzilla as much as I do, but
Indoctrinate him.
I've been trying. He likes Godzilla 2014, and that's about it.
Not even King of the Monsters, just 2014.
Um, he likes 2014 mostly because he has a crush on Aaron Taylor Johnson's character.
Ah, okay.
I know.
You know, maybe that's the thing, since Toho has gotten, like, an American subsidiary, or, like, they're kinda moving into America, maybe we'll start getting more of his man crushes in here to help out. So
Maybe.
that's how you do it.
Like, I guess there was really no man to crush on in King of the Monsters.
Hey, come on.
Not that I can think of.
You can, I'd stand for, not his character, but, good old Tywin Lannister himself.
That voice. You know, Ken Watanabe too, like, sugar daddy material for sure. Cannot believe I just said that. Um,
Again, I gave you the pass to be profane. You know, it all just comes out. There you
any
go.
chance to mix kaiju things with super gay things, I'd take advantage of that, so
Hey, don't worry, don't worry. I gave you the platform to do that, so don't.
appreciated.
But since you definitely shared a little bit of what, you've been doing, in your own work, I will also be doing the same for myself. I have shown you a little bit of pictures as well. I should be sharing it from here. So I cannot see your comments anymore, guys. I'm gonna be using the stream from here. So you guys are good on that end, right?
I'll keep an eye on the comments.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, this is an uncompleted Mothra character sheet, as you can see. It's originally a Godzilla series, and I have gone through a lot of different aspects about Godzilla and
Wow,
what
you, like,
his
put together a slideshow? That is
Yeah, it helps out, with world building, a lot of, like, different aspects and images that, can help in terms of specific aspects that can be like, "What about this aspect of my world building? Does it fit?" "Yes, it fits, my good man." And that sorta helps carry things along. And, yeah, this essentially just everything up until I gotta keep going, yeah. Everything up until this point is just going over Godzilla because I wanted to make this a series with, the first one being, Godzilla Nevermore. And after that, it was gonna be Godzilla Culling, which focused on these three monsters, Varan, Titanosaurus, and Zilla, and sort of what happens after Godzilla's already kind of given his blow to humanity. Um, what happens when he starts just hunting other monsters? Is this good for humanity, or once they're gone, humanity is going to be next? And I made sure to deal with like where these monsters were mutated from, even though maybe in the original like continuity they weren't all mutations, although Zilla was the easy one in this case. and sort of seeing where they went until finally I got to the last series, which had King Ghidorah in it. And I thought, you know what? I have Ghidorah. Why not add Mothra? So I had
Excellent
Mothra ended
choice.
off, and I'm not gonna, I spoiled it for you, but I won't spoil it for everyone else because I will probably be working on this as an audio drama for the channel. But sort of to coin the Mothra series, after the events revolving Godzilla and King Ghidorah, Mothra is kind of left standing. I won't spoil why, but the world's a lot different, and there's a lot of new monsters appearing that Mothra and the human character who goes along with her as a priestess is. So I had a size chart for some of the monsters that were going to be in that series. Hedorah being kind of like the main, like one of the first monsters, and then Mechagodzilla being that final monster. With right now, I have not designed what my versions of Batra and Megalon would look like, as Megalon would follow up Hedorah, and Batra would be accompanying Mothra to fight Hedorah. And as you can see, I can edit this here. When I was designing Mothra, I wanted to use some colors that you don't really see a lot. So a lot more wintry in aesthetic, a lot more blacks, the blues. I wanted to keep the same circle in the Mothra and the Rainbow Mothra wings that I really liked. Gave her the same legs from Tokyo SOS, and the antennae is a little bit more fluffy because I like my floofy Mothras. My floofy Mothras are
Mothra's
very
got to be floofy, right? In some
yeah,
way.
you gotta keep the floof of the moth. There is nothing greater than a floofy Mothra.
You
Like,
know, I think like it's like you're storyboarding using the visuals. Like when you like, do you draw these out? I mean, by hand and then scan them?
so I don't know if ghetto would be the right word to describe it, but I draw these on paper. This is all physical drawings. I take my phone, I take a picture, and then I can actually just show you the process of how I do the size charts. So like when I take a drawing, after that I will do this. I'll go to format and I'll just go remove background, and then I have to keep the drawing itself. And then once that's done, then I can sort of I can resize the drawing so it's in keeping with the size chart. That's what I did for all these monsters, because the Varan's really small and so is the Mothra larva, but the drawings themselves are probably around the same size as like the Zilla here. And the Titanosaurus is actually smaller than the Godzilla drawing. So I had
Hmm.
to resize a lot of stuff in keeping with it, because just because they're bigger here didn't mean they were bigger um, on paper. But it was a good thing that it really helped a lot in terms of laying out everything for myself, because world building is like my greatest passion but also my greatest weakness, because I'll world build like there's no end, and then like my mind's like, you haven't written much, have you? And I'm like, oh no.
Well, it's fun to world build because it's so everything becomes so new, and when that feeling of newness kind of subsides, it's like, oh God, I have to write this now.
Oh yeah, no.
I've been there. I've been there. But
Yeah,
I
it's like
think your method of world building is very unique though.
mhm,
Because like for me, what I normally do, I just take out a Word document and start like just writing down notes. You also pair in visuals and like visual references
mhm.
and like incorporate notes. That's very like multimodal. And I think I actually might try that out myself. Like this is proof, like as a writer, how we can kind of get process ideas from other writers. So
Oh no, it's definitely like I can say, because obviously kaiju is not the only thing I'm interested in. I also do fantasy, and I've done a little bit of world building in a fantasy series that I'm working on, but that's only a Word document because it's mostly because it's human stuff, and I'm not really good at drawing humans. So, but with kaiju, I love drawing my kaiju. Like I've done it for like other stuff as well. Let me just I've done this for so many other Word document things. Let me just do a screen share for um I've done it for this series as well. Like this is like for my own kaiju, Zilgara Heaven's Wrath, which is the first book in the series.
wow,
Like
that's really cool.
yeah, like I've cataloged every single redesign that I've done for the character, and done physiology, designs, descriptions, abilities, roles, um, themes, etc., etc. Like
Okay, so this is also a very English teachery thing for me to say too, but your PowerPoints are formatted beautifully too. Like
you're gonna make me blush in this case because I I pride myself on making sure that I'm like, they look good to me, but if I show it to someone else, please may they be good. Like,
they look very good.
yeah, like I'm definitely kind of OCD about that, but it's like the same thing. I'm wanting to like introduce things similar, but like this is kind of where it ends with the like all the kaiju from the first book. I may be adding one more possibly, but yeah, that's kind of like the entire process I have when it comes to my writing. Especially, I feel like it helps out so much because like when you can visualize the kaiju or you can visualize a space, you can write that space better, like specifically in battles. If you was like, okay, I know how big these monsters are in comparison to this kind of building, so I can be like, well, he throws them into this building and that's how it works. um and stuff like that.
That's such an interesting organizational strategy.
Yeah, like even Brandon here, I've done some character reviews for him stuff. He's doing the same stuff with his Elasmo Giga stuff, which I've done 2 reviews on my channel for his Elasmoverse. But yeah, that is it. It's fun, and like when you get into like the zone in terms of world building and you just like you're listening to some music, just churning it out, you find your peace. But yeah, that's what I've been working on for my fan fictiony stuff. And I'm definitely gonna have to give some stuff to you. I've been giving some stuff to some other people, and I need to Avengers it with all like the big people trying to network so
You
we can
know,
make the dream come true.
a long time, like speaking of like collaboration, like this is an example of like how awesome collaborations can be. Um, my site Kaiju Galaxy, which I showed you before, a bunch of fan fiction writers back in like 2006 and 2007, I know, like a decade ago, basically, we got together and we wrote this gigantic Godzilla fanfic
Mm,
called When Aliens Attack. And we basically incorporated all of the different alien cultures that have appeared throughout the Godzilla franchise
mm,
and all of their different agendas. And we had about like maybe, I think, 12 to 15 writers writing segments, and then we put it all together. It got so much exposure that we actually had a panel at G Fest.
oh my, I was about to,
So,
sorry, I was about
like,
to be really
there,
profanic. Which G Fest was this?
G Fest 2007.
I was there. I went to that G Fest. Oh
We
no.
may have crossed paths and didn't know it.
No, I don't think we've never interacted at G-Fest before. Although I've seen pictures of you here and there at G-Fest. I'm like, oh, it looks like you went to G-Fest.
Oh
Okay.
yeah, way back. Oh God,
Yeah.
10 years ago, I looked ridiculous. So it's
No, you
hard
look
to not forget
very,
that.
very similar. I would say like maybe the hair wasn't like hair was kind of a little different, but look, you look generally the
I
same.
dyed my hair black and I had a bowl cut. I was trying to be emo, and it just didn't work out very well for me.
I remember that whole document being a thing because I remember I talked to someone else who worked on it and they were like, "Oh yeah, I'm working on this big thing with a whole bunch of other writers and we're like talking about the cultures of the different aliens from the Godzilla series." And I'm like, "Oh, wow. Yeah, but you're the one who organized that?"
Yeah.
Like you
Well, I didn't, or I helped facilitate it.
one
It originally wasn't my idea, though.
just like there's those moments where like you knew something happened in the fan base some time ago and then like you connect the dots with the source and you're like, oh,
Small world,
oh
right?
yes, small world indeed.
And that was my first year at G Fest. I was terrified. I was like, oh my God, I gotta talk in front of people. And this was my website that this was done on. Like it,
Yeah.
but it was really cool. And I think that's a good example of just how far our writing can take us, even if it's just fan fiction.
Mhm.
Like, I think a lot of people don't pay enough respect to fan fiction because what we're doing is we're looking at the worlds and the characters that we love, and we're expanding on them with our own unique perspectives.
It's
And
really like I would say, it's things like the kind of the mimetic nature that, A Trekkie's Tale kind of, has in the community and, like, the general public about what fan fiction is, but in reality, it's fan fiction that gets people, into writing, I would
Oh,
say.
yeah.
Like
I always in faculty meetings with other professors, I will always have other faculty, kind of dismiss fan fiction writing as being stupid and hokey and stuff, and
mm.
I always make it a point to be like, "P.S. If it hadn't been for fan fiction, I wouldn't be a writer today, and I wouldn't be a teacher." So,
It's
don't knock fan fiction because it's very
They're
significant.
like, depending on the faculty, I'm not gonna diss actually, no, I can't even say that because my professor's actually really good about it. There's a lot of professors who would be like, "Genre fiction. Ah, that's not real fiction art." And it's like, but that's what interests me."
Yeah, and I think it's important that we teach people that it's okay to be interested in that type of thing too.
No, I would say it's very important because, like, that, people are stifled by that, and I think, like, in certain cases, maybe they, have to learn on their own, and, like, maybe the product that they put out is not as good as what could have been if they were encouraged to do that.
Oh, yeah, for
And I would
sure.
say, real quickly before I continue, Scry says, "Hello, hello," and you just woke up, dude. Maybe that's why your streams are so late, because 'cause you're waking up so late, dude. Like, I wanna catch a stream of you doing WoW, and it's, like, the middle of the night, I'm like, I gotta sleep, man." But, I would say fan fiction and writing is the same as modding in video games. Like, I'm obviously you can see Halo, Destiny,
Mhm.
Master Chief in the background here. Like, I come from a background where video games are very important to me, and what modding has done for a lot of communities. Like, for example, how much do you know about Skyrim per se?
Oh, I used to play Skyrim,
Did you
but
ever
it's
play
been a
any of the
long
other
time.
Elder Scrolls games by any chance, like Morrowind
Mhm.
or Oblivion? Did you ever hear Enderal?
Yes.
Yeah, Enderal it's an entirely different fantasy world, but
Mhm.
it used the, Morrowind engine for its first game, then the Oblivion engine for its second game, and then the third game, it was using the Skyrim engine. That's what Enderal is. Like, that entire game was built off of modding and using the engine that Bethesda used. If people said, "Oh, don't mod, just make your own game," that wouldn't exist. I mean, hell, like, all the like Doom having its source code give it out, and all the mods people got into programming because of the fact that they can mod Doom. Like, the whole meme that Doom runs on anything came out because so many people were dedicated to making good versions of Doom. Like, there's so many ports of Doom. The same thing with Quake. Almost most 3D engine games have a little bit of Quake's code in their DNA. Like, like, modding is why we have so many good games, and fan fiction is why there
Yeah.
are so many good writers
I mean,
in.
it encourages ingenuity.
Mhm, and,
Yeah.
um, I would also say, like, good fan fiction that, like, even fan fiction that doesn't just, like, do its own thing, but, like, fan fiction that respects the lore or the canon of a story is very important because it makes you more creative in a sense where it's like, "Okay, these are the limitations of the canon. How can I make an interesting story within these limitations?" And I think even then, a lot of filmmakers nowadays ignore that, and that's why you see a lot of films where their stories aren't necessarily the best because they don't respect the canon.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Um, like, a lot of the recent Star Wars stuff, specifically Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, like bringing Palpatine back was not the best decision,
Ugh,
or the
don't even
stuff
get me started on
with
that.
the hyperspace run, et cetera, et cetera. Like, there's so much that goes on that a lot of people don't necessarily think of, and
Mhm.
fan fiction most definitely helps rather than hurts writing.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I agree.
Like, anyone doing fan fiction now, like, keep at it. Like, don't give up. Like, don't be discouraged because people say, "Ha ha, you write fan fiction," because maybe you'll actually be writing your own stuff, and it's because you did fan fiction that helped you understand why story beats work or how characters work and stuff of that sort. And I mean, take it from Donnie, who is an actual like teacher in creative writing. You go places.
Oh yeah. Yeah, well, it takes a lot of work. And sometimes like there are failures, sometimes there are challenges that seem like are impossible to traverse, but like it's all about who you surround yourself with as well. Like you have to surround yourself with encouraging people. My friend Cindy, who goes by Stream of Awareness here on YouTube, like we go way far back. She was partially responsible for inspiring me to write Godzilla fan fiction because I would look at her fanfics and they were so beautiful and unique. And I was just like, I want to work hard enough to get good enough at writing to be able to take my ideas and paint them as beautifully as she does, if that makes sense.
Oh no, that definitely makes sense. Like I think everyone has that inspiration that they makes them want to do stuff. Like I mean, hell, starting to get into pixel art, and I really would like to work on some kaiju games. So I've been hammering away at that. I probably after the stream's over, I'm gonna be doing some pixel art, maybe some animations to sort of get better at that. But like definitely don't give up at what you're doing. Keep at it. Even if you've got like your lows in terms of your sub count or your views, like don't see that as well, people are listening to you. Oh, I'm a one hit wonder. It just is a reason for you to really get back on there, re-examine and just push forward.
Do it because you love it.
Yes, that's the
And
most important thing of all, definitely.
you know, some like even myself, I sometimes still struggle with that. Like with YouTube, for example, I've been doing YouTube for 10 years, over 10 years. And I only have about like 3,000 subscribers. And it used to really bother me a lot.
Mhm.
But now I just enjoy it, so I'm going to do it. The same thing with fan fiction. I used to have a relatively large following of my fan fiction a long time ago, especially on fanfiction.net. Remember that place? Still exists. But because of all the years, like I mean, since I've written, like that probably isn't there anymore. So I have to build myself back up from square one again. But
Yeah.
it's all about surrounding yourself with people who can help you, who can encourage you, like opportunities. Like that's why I really want to make opportunities for people
Mhm.
to grow their work, whether it be getting feedback on something or featuring their work on a website, so on and so forth. Like that validation is extremely important.
Indeed. Actually, one of my friends, Daniel, said, "Very motivational. Thank you, my man."
Thank
And
you.
Machine Dragon Slayer says, "I'm heading to bed. Sunrise is ramping up." Wow. Oh, so you're like on a completely different side of the world to us.
I think I may know who that is.
That
That might be my friend.
because I've never seen the name before, so that definitely might be someone you may know. And I've noticed we've hit 2 hours.
Oh my god.
Yeah, we've been at it.
Time
I know
flies when you're having
there's
good conversation.
yeah, indeed. I just noticed but like I would say like we hit all the bullet points I really wanted to get for this stream and why specifically I thought you'd be good for the stream. And I know there are some people trying to head out because of either other stuff, sleep, etc. But one thing that you would want to leave everyone here with, what would that be?
Ooh, hmm. Don't be afraid to take risks with your creative outlets. Don't be afraid to try something new. And don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help. If you're stuck on something, if you have writer's block and you need a second opinion or you need a pep talk, reach out to people.
Mhm. Like, no, that's definitely very good. I know a lot of people can be very, like, cautious about their work, very defensive in it, maybe because they've been ridiculed about their work before, or
Mhm.
they feel they're not as good. But yeah, it's very good to know that there are people out there who appreciate their work. And I mean, that doesn't mean obviously coddle the work and say, "Oh, it's good, never change." But if you're someone who always wants to help and bring opportunities, and I feel that is something I've been wanting to do in the community too, definitely have a strong hand in encouragement, but also never this would be my thing that I'll take away, is that if you want to help people, never be afraid to be honest, but speak the truth in love. Always speak the truth in love, because that is what is most important, because it shows like that you actually care what other people are doing. And it's not just, oh, stuff's bad, change it, so then I'll like it. No, I'll speak the truth in love. That'd be my takeaway from it all.
I agree 100%.
And real quickly, I'll have this be our last question. Brand Davis is currently writing a Godzilla crossover, so the stream is very encouraging. Well, I'm happy that it's encouraging.
That means a lot.
What's it called? I made sure to link Donnie's stuff. I linked Kaiju Galaxy in the chat. I linked his stuff in the description, so you can go to him there. And again, this has been a great stream. Donnie, thank you for being on.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
For having, like, I knew I'd have you have like a great stream in terms of a lot of content. 2 hours is perfect. So again, I'm very appreciative.
And I'm appreciative as well. Thank you.
And thank you all for sticking with us for this long and being really great subscribers. It means the world to me. So, Donnie, would you give us your intro? All right, outro. We're just starting now.
My outro. Oh, let's see. Keep on writing. Keep on being creative. And if you do not like Mothra, give her a second chance, because there's a little bit more depth to the character than what most people realize.
And I would say, love fluffy moths, guys. That'd be my thing. And without further ado, I'll see you guys next time. Thank you for the stream.